Well, now we're going to talk about exit strategies. A lot of us are getting older. I know I turned 58 last year, going to turn 59 this year. The big 6-0 is staring me down. And you start thinking about this business that you spent 30 years building, and you got it to the point where it is, and you're starting to think, what am I going to do with it, and what's going to happen? Well, first off, if you have followed the E-Myth, and if you have followed the Beautiful Business Book, you'll find out that you should be constantly thinking about your exit strategy. Your whole point to build this business is build a business that then can be sold, and that you can easily sell. Somebody else can easily take over. You do that through using systems. We talk about that a lot. Using Know-It-All. If you haven't had a chance to look at that, you really need to look at Know-It-All, because that's a vital part of your exit strategy, is to make sure that whoever comes in after you has all the knowledge they need to run this company. The other thing you want to look at is your profitability over the last 3 years. Look at your P&Ls. You want to create this boring business that doesn't require your presence. That's what you want to do in order to have an exit strategy. Now, as an exit strategy, what are some of the things that you could do? Well, one thing you can do is, obviously, you could sell it to somebody else. Usually, the sale to somebody else doesn't go quite the way you think it would. There's all kinds of different evaluations you can put on it to try to figure out what your company might be worth. Generally, you just think about it. If this was an investment, not buying a job, if it were an investment, if I would invest, let's say $100,000, I would expect a return of probably 15 to 20% per year. If I'm not getting that 15 to 20%, then I'm not going to invest in it, because I have other opportunities where I can invest. If that's the case, then you think about your company. If your company produces $10,000 in profit, and that represents a 20% return on investment, then I would only pay $50,000 to buy your company, because I need to make that 20%. There's risk involved here. I can make 10% in the stock market, sometimes better than that. I certainly don't want to acquire a lawn maintenance company and then only make 10% on that. So when you think about it from that standpoint, don't worry about your equipment, don't worry about the trucks, don't worry about everything else. Just think about how much money it produces and how much somebody would pay, and take that figure and figure that's 20% of whatever it is that they're going to pay. If you're making $100,000 in profit, then somebody might pay you $500,000 for that company. Now, how big is a company that makes $100,000 in profit? Well, that's all over the board. You could have a $1 million company that's making 10% profit. You could have a $500,000 company that's making 20% profit. Either way of those, it's going to be worth the same amount of money. So it's not how much gross sales you do, it's actually how much profit. Now, the way you get into that profit is you have to pay yourself a salary, a decent salary, something that you would have to pay somebody to replace you. So you take that into account, take into account all the other expenses, the boat, and all the little tools and toys that we buy for ourselves as owner benefit, and you can put that back in, and that becomes part of profit. So once all that profit is in there, now you can think about selling it. Now, another exit strategy that you might have is passing it on to a family. And you can pass it on to family, and sometimes that's a really good way to do it. You train them in there. Be really careful about how you train your family, particularly if it's your son or your daughter or somebody like that. Be careful how you train them in, because oftentimes when family comes in, they're never given credit for the success of the business, but if there's any failure, then they're given blame for that. So be careful about that. There's a book called My Father's Business, which is about Dollar General. I would highly recommend that you read that. It's a great story. It's a biography of the guy who had to take over from his father and take over the business, Dollar General, and he grew it, and then he ended up getting out of it as well. So, some ideas on exit strategies. There's more ideas out there. Talk to different people, but you should always be thinking about your exit strategy.